How you doing, guys? Matt from the Beer Massif podcast, back with a little bit more Wednesday beer talk. This time we're going to take a trip down the old YouTube path, visit someone's been doing a YouTube thing for quite some time. One of the older faces when it comes to YouTube beer talk and beer reviews. Kind of funny to say that because he's quite young in comparison, and that would be Peter from the Master of Hoppets. Yes, Peter van Godtberg Jensen. He is a longtime beer reviewer on YouTube, one of the more widely viewed YouTubers out there, and he brings a unique perspective to beer in general, being that he got into it so young, not being from the United States, but then traveling the United States, spending some time here, getting into beer here, and then moving back overseas and becoming a brewer. So while still reviewing beers and brewing beers, living in that unique kind of world where he's on both ends of the spectrum, but also having that unique insight, doing this both on the Euro scene and the United States scene. So yeah, sit back, relax, and we're gonna sit here and talk about some beer stuff, some YouTube stuff, a whole bunch of fun stuff. So here we go. Peter van Godtberg Jensen, the Master of Hoppets. Enjoy.
It's aquavit, and they didn't know what it was, and I explained what it was, and like you have to like a caraway because it's
caraway rye bread. It's like drinking caraway rye bread.
Yeah, it's like so heavily, and it's boozy. I mean, it's like 50% at least over here, 51 or something. And then
40% over here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But and then I think it was around 40, maybe. It was the exact same bottle you sit with right there because that's like the U.S. export one. So I brought that to a party and everyone hated it.
I actually love it. I never had it until I met my wife, and second I had it, I'm like, I'm like literally my favorite thing, almost like a death row meal or last meal. It might involve caraway rye bread. That's how much I love caraway rye bread. So when I had it, they were trying to explain it to me, but they didn't say caraway. They were just like, oh, it's spicy and this and that and the other thing. And I drank it. I'm like, this is like drinking my favorite thing on earth. I'm like, I fucking love this. And it got me I got really peeved because Hill Farmstead did a aquavit barrel-aged beer. Yeah, but it's Hill Farmstead, so I couldn't get it. You know what I mean? Because it's what they do. But I was so chomping at the bit to try that. I was like, oh my god, that's gotta be heaven. There's
a couple of breweries over here that's done aquavit barrel-aged beers, and I know because Three Floyds got involved with Mikkeller and opening War Pigs, they did aquavit barrel-aged Dark Lord at one year.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you have it? Did you try it?
No, you can still buy it in Copenhagen, but it's like $125-$150. So no one gets it. And if it was like maybe the vanilla marshmallow hangy or something, people would pay that. Yeah. But because it's an aquavit version, people are like, nah.
Oh man, I'd find a couple like-minded people and let's split this bottle. It's got to be just for the experience alone and just the fact that it's and that's the thing over there. It's probably, I would imagine if they brought it over here, it would sell, because over there it's like aquavit is kind of like, I guess, a more kind of like generic spirit over there, I would imagine.
It's kind of like, it's a traditional spirit, but it's also a bit like the old man's spirit. It's like something you associate with like your parents and grandparents and whatnot that they drink for festive occasions. So we have it like every Easter and every like Christmas, you always have it. But often if you go out to dinner, you have it as well. If you go to like classic restaurants, we actually, I just before this, I was out to celebrate. Well, it's actually a belated Christmas present for my grandmother. We went to a very historic tavern close to here that was like a hub for freedom fighters during World War II. That's made movies and stuff about it. And they have like a 3-page aquavit menu. Just with different types of aquavit. And then you have like the old school classic Danish food that we also have for Christmas and whatnot. And then you could get it with aquavit. We didn't have aquavit because we were driving there and it's in the middle of nowhere, but they have a huge selection of it. So and people still drink it. I mean, if we have Christmas parties with friends or whatever, it's just a tradition. You have to have a bottle of aquavit. That's just how it is.
Where I grew up in Pennsylvania. I originally lived in New Jersey, and up where I moved into Pennsylvania, I moved there when I was like 12, and a huge Polish background, so a lot of it's Blackberry Brandy. That's like the thing that is like constantly like and everybody's house you go to, there's a big bottle of LaRue Blackberry Brandy, and it's just like everybody's like, you got to drink some, and if it's like, oh, good God, I'd rather drink this because that's like this. I mean, not that Aalborg isn't, it's unique in and of itself, but Blackberry Brandy, especially Polish Blackberry Brandy, is like drinking like sugar water. It's like just the sweetest thing in the history of mankind. I can't even do it.
They're kind of like a liqueur or what?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's more of a liqueur, but it's so sweet. It's sweet. It's like sweet.
Okay.
Like it's barely. Yeah, you're drinking candy, but hey, man, people buy that beer wise, so why wouldn't people want to drink that in liquor? Who knows?
There's a big tradition in Denmark of making it yourself as well, but you don't distill it. Like you kind of mix it with. So if it's basically a lot of companies. Even Aalborg does it. Aalborg Akvavit, or the Danske Spritfabrikker is the main company name, but they make like base akvavits with no flavorings in like small jars, and then you can flavor it yourself. My dad does it. He does like so many different ones. Flavor it with dill, flavor it with cherries, whatever. So you have the base akvavit already with the caraway, and that's the only thing. Like for an akvavit to be an akvavit, it has to be at least like 40%, and it has to have caraway, and then you can put in whatever else you like. So he does like all kinds of Ramson. He did 1 year as well. It's like he just does it with whatever he has on hand. So yeah, it's a big tradition. But when you make it yourself like that, it's got a different name and it's very hard to pronounce. But it's called Bjesk.
Okay.
So yeah.
They kind of do that over here. I'm sure they do it other places. I have a couple of friends that are I believe, what do they call it? Limoncello? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Where they take like a grain alcohol, but then they make their own kind of concoction out of it and stuff like that. I think it's either Italian or Spanish base or something like that, and they're not actually distilling it, making it themselves. So, hey, necessity is the mother of invention. So if you need something and it's not to your taste, you might as well make it the way you want. So. I think we're actually doing the podcast already because I'm leaving that part in. So let's actually just go from there. Welcome to the Aquavit show with me and Peter, the master of Hoppets. Now, welcome to the Beer Massive podcast. We're back from a little bit of a hiatus due to COVID and whatnot, but having a bunch of different guests on, having some brewers, having some journalists, and then we got a fellow Beertuber on by the name of Peter. What's going on, brother?
Not much, talking to you. Hanging out,
there you go.
About to crack a beer soon. Doing good.
Nice. So the first thing I want to say out of the chute is, like, did you ever do any kind of research to see where you place as far as one of the original Beertubers? Because it was in like the first Beertuber around 2008, 2007, 2008, I believe, and I think you started doing it around 2009. Is that correct?
Yeah. Actually, when I started, I watched Joe D and El Harlock Lee from Canada. And I have like, before I actually started the channel, I tried to do some videos with a phone, an old camera phone, like a Sony Ericsson, whatever, like shitty quality, where I filmed just the beer and not myself being poured. And I try to talk about it. And you can see in the background, I think it's Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. And I have the website up so people can see the website on the computer, and then I try and talk. It was a weird format, and
do you still have them
on my old computer? I do have it.
Yeah, you should upload some.
It would be interesting. I think it's rather cringeworthy. I mean, when I did the channel,
was it the crazy Ericsson phone that twisted open?
Was
it orange and rotated? Okay, no.
But it was not one of those. it was a newer one, but it was just one that was marketed as being a great camera phone. And it had flash photography and stuff like that. So, okay, we got a beer coming.
There you go. What you got?
Go. So, I got this.
Really?
So, Schlinkala Hillis. And I even think she found the glass. Oh, she found a bottle of it. Ooh, great having a girlfriend on hand helping out.
If only I had something to drink.
Oh, man.
This is not coordinated by anybody. Like, this is not, we didn't do this on purpose. This is just random.
No, yeah, that's totally random. Okay, yeah, it made it to the US as well. The unfiltered one, right?
Well, this is really interesting. They sell the one that you have in the bottles here in the United States. This is a company called Be United. They're actually an importer over here in the United States. they actually they import beer. They actually import Schleckler beers. They're their main importer over here, but they've started doing something very interesting where they actually have Schleckler fill up tankers and ship the whole tanker to the United States, and then they can it themselves at the facility.
That's pretty. I saw some pictures of that, like these huge tankers that they're shipping over with fresh beer.
And the best thing they've been doing with that is they've been doing it with like big beers, like J.W. Lee's Harvest Ale, and they've been doing little 8-ounce cans of like J.W. Lee's Harvest Ale and stuff like that. So you're getting these more proper small format of these huge beers, which is really cool. They're also a brewery called OEC. I don't know if you've ever had anything from them.
No,
but they make a bunch of great beers also. But yeah, nice.
But is that the unfiltered one? Because I've seen like the unfiltered one, it has just a small like line underneath the label where it says unfiltered in the States, because I know it's in cans unfiltered in the States. But in Europe, it has a huge area. It's just like special edition.
Yes. Yeah, it says unfiltered.
Yeah, so it's like the first time they've ever done this. And they released it, I think, late last year for the first time. And then they had a big release a couple months ago.
Well, no, that's the thing. This is the one from last year. That's how old this is.
It's
like
okay.
It was canned August 2020 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's still very tasty. I drank one last night.
Oh, that's good. This is a month old, so this is really fresh. And you can. What I love about this beer, the marshmallow fluff head you can make on it. The head retention is crazy.
Yeah, it's the original slow pour beer. You know, you can get that hedge. If you got another bottle, you probably get the head to come that far out of the actual thing. But like, why did you choose that beer to drink today? Is that just one of your staple favorites, or it's?
See, as I've been really getting into lagers, and I've had a big throwback to some classic beer. I love to try all the haze and barrel aged stouts and fun stuff, whatever. But on my own, if I'm drinking a beer, I'll usually go for a lager because it's just so nice to drink. And then for a while, Schlenkala was kind of in and out of the country here. But then I found out, like, on their web shop in Germany, you can buy these bottles for like €1.50 a bottle, which is like, what, $1.50 a bottle, which is, it's nuts.
We $6 a bottle, $5 to $6 a bottle over here. Yeah,
it's nuts. It's so cheap, and shipping is affordable too. So I've just been, buying it straight at the source and having cases shipped up just to have around because it's such a great beer.
Do you like their bigger stuff too, like the Marzen and the Doppelbock and all those?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Schenkala has been a favorite brewery of mine for a while. I've been to the brewery a couple of times down in Bamberg and visited their tap room as well. Last time I was there, we had a private room. They have you can book a private room there. And with a friend of mine who works in a beer store down there called Biothek, he was in chat with Schenkala, and they brought out some vintage bottles from the cellar. Ooh. And then we had a private tasting in a private room around a round table with our own waitress. So we were having this tasting, drinking these beers. We had food. And then she came in once in a while. Do you need something else to drink? It was amazing. So then just dead fresh Helles or Märzen, whatever. I like all their beers, but I think my all-time favorite of their beers is probably the Urbock because it's like the most smoky. But yeah, I wouldn't drink a lot of it. Like, this is the beer that they make you can drink quite a few of.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I think it had to be over a year ago because I did it with a friend and a friend of mine, and we were together. So it was pre-pandemic, but we did a 9-year vertical of the Doppelbock. From which we thought was a very interesting idea. We did it live on YouTube. We were like, this is going to be great. And then once we got to the third one, we're like, oh shit, what are we doing right now? And it was like, I think it spanned from like 2005 to 2000, like whatever, 14 or something like that of the Doppelbock. And it was fun, but yeah, no, I'm not going to do a 9-year vertical of Doppelbock ever again. Well, I will, but I'll forget about it. It's kind of like anytime you do something horrible, you forget about it and go back to it and say never do it again. Well, you're getting into lagers like big. Was that ever like, where did you progress? How did you get into Beertube? Like, what was the beer that turned you on that made you want to start doing those kind of things? And was that originally kind of lager realm, lager territory?
Yeah, I mean, I've always grown up with lager being the big thing. In Denmark, the drinking age is 16. So like you start quite early experimenting with trying things. And even in high school parties, you're allowed to drink. And there's a bar there. It's the teachers run the bar, and they're the one that pours you the beer. But that's the mass produced stuff. It's Tuborg, it's Carlsberg, it's whatever. So and if we had a party, I'd ask him about what about this and that and this and that. And in the beginning, it was like I drink, Carlsberg, then maybe try a Stella, then try whatever and this and that. And then there was like 2 beers that kind of were the game changers. One was a English golden ale from the Badger Brewery called Golden Champion. It was a golden ale with elderflower or something like that. And that was the first time I had like a really fruity beer. So I was like, wow, can beer taste like that? And I was like, it was so weird. I remember just being quite baffled by the fact that a beer could taste like fruit and flowers and whatever. And then the other beer was a total different ballpark beer. It was a Baltic Porter. And in Denmark, we have a history of brewing Baltic Porters for the Baltic market. Carlsberg's done it and whatnot. And in our city, there's quite like one of the most famous and highest rated Baltic Porters in Europe is from originally my city, but moved production to another brewery up north called Tisted Limfjords Porter. And it's a 7.2% Baltic Porter with smoked malt and English licorice. So, quite a different ballpark. And that was
especially just like... and that was when? I mean, think about that combination. What was the date? You're probably talking about early 2000s?
It's been around 2007, I think.
Yeah,
something
so
like
I mean...
When I tried it...
Kind of adjuncts and a beer like that, it's pretty interesting.
In that format... It was, it's been around for years. It was released with these things in the beer in 1989.
Oh, geez.
So it's been around for a while. And my dad grew up drinking it. And, it's such a weird history because on the back of the label, there is, or it used to be, recipes for mixed drinks you could make with it if you went out. Because they were trying, at one point, sales were not too crazy because people were a bit afraid of the dark, if you could say it like that, because it's they're really smoky and roasty and whatnot. There you go, porter.
This is one of the original Baltic Porter was one of the original beers that got me into beer too, and it's the
cool
Porter, or Porter and Baltic Porter. But that's pretty cool, man. A Baltic Porter, bridging that gap for you.
Yeah, totally.
And was it on from there? Well, like from there, you're just like, I need to figure out what's going on here. How deep can I go down the rabbit hole, kind of thing?
It just started with me checking out different things after that. I just really gravitated toward English beer because I like the porter, but it was still, when you only know Pilsners and you have the palate of a 17-year-old, it's quite offensive, you can say, like when flavors are ashy and roasty and smoky and licoricey. So I kind of liked it, but my dad taught me to do a half and half with it, where you mixed half porter and half Pilsner. So that was how I'd drink it in the beginning. But then, I started exploring English beer and I discovered Fuller's and Samuel Smith's and all that. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And then a friend of mine in school was kind of into it too. And he was from Poland. So whenever he would go home to visit family, he would bring back Baltic Porters from Poland. So we would drink like Siwiec Porter and stuff like that. And also just lots of random Polish lagers. And I think also like honey beers was a big thing at one point in Poland before they had a big craft revolution. So we drank that, and also some fruit beers, I think. And then from there, we kind of gravitated towards just trying different beers and in different styles. So we tried a lot of the English stuff because we also had an English bar, like an English pub. So we went there to drink beer on cask, actually, because it was a cask certified English pub, one of the only ones outside of the UK or something at that point, run by an Englishman, of course. So we drink a lot of English cask ale, and a little after that we found out we also had a small bottle shop in the city, and they were kind of the ones that started introducing me to the real American stuff and whatnot, and all the American styles like IPAs and things like that. I had tried some when traveling, mainly in 2007, I think, when I was on the Virgin Islands. I tried Flying Dog for the first time, which I think was my first American pale ale.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I kind of started going to that shop that it really started progressing, where we tried like Flemish oat bruns and lambic and all kinds of stuff.
You're talking about if you're talking same timeline around 2007, 8 around.
Yeah, it's been something like that, just right up until I started the channel.
And then if you're getting American stuff, it's probably just what Sierra Nevada, Bells, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we did get a lot of Great Divide as well. Like Yeti was on the shelves, and in Bombers, and what else was it? There was also another Avery.
Okay, yeah. Avery's the big barrel aged stuff, like Uncle Jacob's Stout and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, not Uncle Jacob's. Even I think it was the Tsar was one of them. Russian Imperial.
Oh yeah.
Tsar the Dictator series and Maharaja and the Kaiser. Hog Heaven, the Reverend, the Beast. Samuel's Ale.
Samuel's is still one of my favorite beers of all time. I love that goddamn beer. Why did you hit record on YouTube? Were you just watching it and then you're just like, I want to do this, or is that simple?
I did rate beer, and I didn't like writing reviews. And then I looked up on YouTube if anyone did reviews on YouTube, and a few people did. I was like, hey, it's a good way to log what I'm drinking, and it's a bit fun because there was a little bit of a community aspect about it. So I just started doing it myself. That was pretty much it.
Was there a reason why you chose to do it in English from the get?
Just because I felt like I could reach a broader audience if people were actually interested in watching it, and also because I was an English major in school. When I started that, I just started the university around the time I started the channel, and my major was English. So I don't know. I just felt like it went hand in hand, and also because I drank a lot of international beers, and I already knew that beer was not as big in Denmark as it is now, so it just ended up being English.
Did you ever get any kind of guff from people being like, come on, man, do your reviews in your native language, like locally or anything like that? People give you a little bit of sass?
No, never. Actually, no one have ever asked me to. I remember in the beginning, people thought it would be fun if I did videos in Danish, but we never just got around to it. I think we did one video or something like that. Or two maybe, where we did subtitles, just because people wanted to hear what it sounded like when we spoke Danish.
Okay.
But otherwise, no.
And just knowing that, your native language, Danish, when you see an American beer reviewer review a Danish beer, how much do you laugh during the pronunciation?
Well, I don't really laugh. You kind of like, that's kind of funny when they try to pronounce it. But yeah, most people butcher it because it's a very hard language.
And you said you went to university for English as an English major. You ended up coming over here to the United States. Where you're over here for about a year and a half?
6 months.
6 months. Was that part of the program? Like, is that when you're being an English major, you pretty much need to come here? Is that part of it? Or was it also kind of like you wanted to anyway?
Yeah, it was like a voluntary thing. When I started, they said, like, on the 4th semester, you'll have the ability to go abroad to an English-speaking country, and we think it's a very good idea if you want to teach English. And I was like, hey, yeah, of course I want to do that. And then I talked to a friend in school and in my class, and we said, yeah, let's do it. Let's sign up. And then like a month before we had everything ready, we got a scholarship from the university to go and all kinds of stuff. And then just like the month before I was leaving, he was like, yeah, I don't want to leave anyways. Okay. And then I just went on my own. I knew no one there. It was quite the experience. Like I knew no one. I just being dropped in a foreign country in the state in the middle of the desert because it's New Mexico, and then just like doing your own thing. It was quite a cool experience.
Why New Mexico? Was that just kind of the place that was kind of penned as the place you would go, or did you have a choice between a region?
I had a choice between collaborative universities, because if I chose a collaborative university that worked with ours, I wouldn't have to pay tuition. Because then they had a program where like they took exchange students from that university and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And then back then, it was because of beer. I chose New Mexico because it was closest to California, and I wanted to explore the California beer scene. That was why I chose New Mexico. My other choice was Iowa, and that was before toppling and all that. And then Georgia, and also North Dakota,
Georgia.
I think.
No. I mean, Georgia would have been cool because you had access to the East Coast and there's a big railway system you can get around. But so no, like when did you come to the States again? What was that? 2012, 2013.
So 12 was what I've been before the exchange trip. So the first time was in 6, then 7, and then in 12 on exchange, and then I didn't go back until 18.
Okay. When you came here in 2012 for the exchange, you said you came by yourself, so you didn't really know much of anything. I think that probably ended up being a positive for you, because it forces you to immerse yourself. Because if you have somebody else, you just hang out with them and kind of bounce off that person. So it forces you to go in. Knowing you're already knee deep in the beer, you're doing beer stuff. You move here. What was the biggest plus and minus? For like, what was, not even that, not a broader question, like what was the culture shock moment, beer specifically, of coming here, this is so different? Was there anything in particular, or was it more just okay, go ahead, sorry.
The shock was the support of local breweries. In Denmark, people have always had their thing with local breweries, we like to go to this and this and that, but Danes, because we're a small country, we don't like to travel far for some reason. For example, we think a 5-hour car ride to Copenhagen is crazy long, or you can actually do it maybe in 3.5. But we think that's crazy long. If we have to drive an hour, we think it's crazy long, because the country is so small. But in the States, you hear people make these crazy road trips to visit breweries. I was like, you actually do that? That's so cool, because Danes didn't do that. They wouldn't bother, not like these crazy beer journeys. Not until people got really into beer around maybe actually the time I went to the States. That was where it really boomed. That was all, first small waves, and then around that time was all the craft beer bars really popping up and stuff like that. But I was really impressed by the fact that Americans really wanted to travel for beer, because I never experienced that. And also the whole atmosphere of going to your local brewery, buying growlers, having them filled up and bringing them home. No one did that here. Most of the local beers would just be bottles. You bought it in the supermarket or whatever, or maybe you went to a brewery that was a brew pub and went there to eat, and that's all. I feel like the support of the local brewery thing was just much more intense than it was at home. And then again, fucking people driving all over the place to visit Hill Farmstead or all this stuff, in the middle of nowhere, destination tourism kind of almost. That's very new here. So yeah, that was really cool.
Now, you're talking about New Mexico. There's some really great breweries out that way. But you said you came here specifically to kind of, well, not specifically, but you wanted to pick that university so you had access to California. So what was the first California brewery that you went to when you made that first road trip, and why was it Russian River?
It wasn't Russian River.
Oh, no. What was it?
So I actually stayed with Ryan Rashan.
Okay, yeah.
Fellow YouTube, or he used to do YouTube stuff. He does maybe once in a while.
Yeah, every now and then he pops up. Yeah.
It's called Stumpy Joe Jr. So I actually, because I was doing YouTube, I knew so many people around the States. So I mean, I met him. I met Winton as well, who did the Beertuber. I met Chad from Chad's Beer Reviews back then. But him and I went. I think the first place we went to was Stone.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I had Pliny the Elder on tap for the first time, which was real fun. Nice. But it wasn't dead fresh, and I remember being a little bit disappointed because it wasn't super in your face, but it was nice. But that was the first experience, and I was mind blown by Ed Stone. The location was, I was just wow, this is crazy.
I mean, I have limited experience with overseas, but it's it seems like the vastness of the United States tends to be the biggest kind of thing for a lot of people. It's just opens, the buildings are bigger, the trips are longer, everything's just bigger. You know what I mean? Sometimes as a detriment, you know what I mean? Because the people are bigger and crazier and whatnot. So 6 months, man, did that change you quite a bit? I mean, 6 months isn't a long time, but you can fit a lot in 6 months. When you arrived here and then when you went back, did you see yourself change beer wise, just as far as what you thought about beer, your palate, all those kind of things?
I got really hooked on Californian style of IPAs. I already liked West Coast IPAs, but back then when I was in Denmark, we got West Coast IPAs, we got Green Flash, whatever, but like 4 or 5 months old bottles on shelves. So I thought that was how West Coast beers were. And then you go to the West Coast and you sit there at Stone and you have fresh Ruination IPA on tap and you're like, what? Because you didn't expect it to be like this intense. And also the big, huge, mind-blowing thing was we went to Alpine. And old school Alpine, I was just like,
palate record, the whole 9,
crazy. So that was one of the biggest surprises. Was like American beer, especially IPAs, are not what we're experiencing. And also because they were so old, they were often oxidized. But you didn't really notice that because that was part of the profile. Because American beer was kind of like that when you got it over here. At least the IPAs.
When you not just you, but when you got back, did you see? Because you're talking about 2012 to 13. That is literally like when everything started to go crazy across the board beer wise.
Yeah.
Was Denmark, was that area where you grew up? Did it change when you got back? When you got back, was beer different there, or was it much the same? And if not, when did it change? When did it explode?
Yeah, I think you could mostly look at Denmark as a whole in terms of beer scene because we're so small. So there isn't like the big, vast regional variant. Maybe if you can see there's a bit of a regional variant in terms of splitting it by saying Zealand / Copenhagen and the rest, because Copenhagen is a bit more progressive and it's a bigger city, and a lot of the most well-known breweries from Denmark are based in that area. But it was definitely more. There was already a tendency to brew more American kind of stuff, but I think just since 2012 it just took hold even more. And people was more and more influenced by the American scene. And around that time, Mikkeller also started doing Mikkeller Beer Geek, or the Mikkeller Celebration Festival. Oh, what's it called? Copenhagen Beer Celebration, CBC. And I think they did the first year in 2012, actually. Yeah. So you started getting all these hype brewers over and things like that. And then a lot of, especially in Copenhagen, like Amager Bryghus, they started doing loads of collaboration with a lot of these hype breweries. So like people started to get more of a feel for especially the American culture and what was going on in the States, because before that, a lot of craft breweries, so there were some like doing all these American beers. Like there was a few kind of pioneers and like Beer Here and Mikkeller and Nørrebro Bryghus when Sean Hill from Hill Farmstead was a brewer there. So they were like pioneering like barrel-aged beer and stuff like that. But otherwise, small local breweries would brew classic German beer or Belgian beer or English ales or whatever. So it's kind of like that. And then after that, it seems like the American tradition was pushed even more. So like, it just took hold like crazy.
How has it changed since then? Because it almost seems like they took that kind of American influence, but now it seems like they're slowly starting to bring their own, like, and this is every region, just not yours, but it seems like everybody's taken it as a jumping off point and started to kind of push their own kind of vibe and essence into their beer, whether it be like terroir-based stuff, hop-based stuff, kind of fruits and stuff like that. How different has that changed from them trying to mimic American beer to a certain extent to now kind of brewing their own beer, for lack of a better?
I think there's still a huge tendency to mimic the American scene. Like whenever a new brewery opens up, New England IPA, New England IPA, New England IPA, New England IPA, New England IPA. Like that's how it is in the beginning until they get a foothold, and then they start playing around a bit more. With the exception of a few, where they're throwing a bit more back to classic European stuff. Two breweries I can name drop: Slow Burn Brewing Company and Bad Seed Brewing. They do loads of varied styles. They kind of do a bit more classic stuff. They still do the hazy IPAs, but they are looking more at exploring like the different styles of lager or classic like stouts and things like that. But especially lager. A lot of brewers are trying to do stuff like that here as well now.
And it's much the same over here. Like a lot of, even boutique breweries like, Other Half and breweries like that are making a lot of lagers, which it plays over here. But the price point, because, tank space is time and it costs money, and lagers, you can't rush them unless you're Jack's Abbey. But it's got to be even harder over there because, even though we're macro lager over here, you're more grounded in traditional lager over there. How does like the local guy down the road go to the brewery, and is he like, how do they accept the new school kind of lager thing?
It's kind of a it's kind of split in two camps. And if it's Mikler from Mikler, he's been announcing like the past 2 years or so, he hoped it would be the year of the lager because he's been also like really trying to promote it, and they've been brewing a lot of lagers and whatnot. But it seems to be two camps. There's the camp that really is starting to get into it and love the simplicity and elegance of a lager and all the soft, complex nuances, because lagers are complex when they're well made. It's just soft beer. It's not smack in the face beer like a big barrel aged pastry stout or whatever. So there's that camp that kind of gets it, and then there's the camp that says, I do not want to pay a craft premium for a lager because they are associating most lager with, either whatever crappy macro stuff or from a regional size brewery that's fairly huge where it's decent. So they can get it cheaper. So it kind of falls into two camps, which is pretty interesting because craft lager is more expensive here. It's the same price as an IPA, a New England IPA sometimes. And people are like, yeah, it's a lager. And I feel I've tried to advocate against that just because you shouldn't knock a lager just because it's expensive and then not buy it and buy a New England IPA instead, just because you feel like that's more fair because it's more hops, because it takes up tank space. It takes a longer time to produce. And if you're not a huge family-run brewery that's been around for generations, you can't make it at those price points. That's just how it is.
But isn't there like a difference though? Because it's like, when the big producer, the big, not even macro level, but a huge brewery tries to make like a hazy on their system, they can rarely kind of get to the level that you would get from like a smaller kind of like boutique kind of brewery. But that's that they're trying to get to that hazy kind of that richness, the fullness, the impact of hops. Whereas the smaller craft brewery is really trying to get, unless they're doing like an Americanized, crazy hopped up version of a lager, they're really trying to get to where the traditional person is. Like not the crappy macro level kind of.
No, but like the old school, very well done traditional. Yes.
So when you can pick up a really traditional old school Austrian or German kind of lager or Czech lager for at $8.99, whatever, a 6, and then you get a 4-pack for $16. When they're trying to get there, that's what they're trying to mimic to a certain extent, but with their own profile, it's a different road to hoe. You know what I mean? Like
totally. And it's also a difficult one because it's also it's a bit harder to sell and harder to market. And I think a lot of the time it's also a lot of these beers are made by brewers for brewers. If you can say almost all brewers want to make a great perfect lager. They're just so hard to make, and they're harder to market to the craft audience because of the reasons we talk about. So I think that's part of it as well.
That's like if you go to a French restaurant and you're standing there talking to a cook, and if you want to know if he's a good cook, you don't say, make me this crazy souffle. You go, make me an omelet.
Yeah.
Make me an omelet. Because I'm going to judge you on that basic, simple omelet. You know what I mean? That's like a lot of brewers. That's how they do it. Show me your lager. What was I going to say? Oh God, I totally spaced. I'll have to cut this part out because I had something else I wanted to talk to you about specifically versus stuff over there. I don't know. Anyway, back to the YouTube channel. Did you see any kind of change in what people following you or comments or whatever from your trips? Because you do a lot of American beers, you know what I mean, on your channel. You had a lot of people send over beers. You do a lot of like big boutique beers. You do a lot of all kinds of beers. So did predominantly most of your beers that you were doing before you came over here were kind of regional stuff that you had over there? Over here you did a lot of American beers. Now when you move back overseas, back home, you kind of split down the middle of what you do. Did you see any kind of like gain or loss or different kind of engagement with your audience based on what you're covering?
Oh yeah, totally. I think my biggest audience is still Americans, which is weird, but I think it's because I've covered so much American stuff over the years. And then I think second is like Great Britain or something, and then Germany and Sweden, and Denmark is actually a bit far down the list. But it's a bit split, and you can I try to have a foot in both camps. And I can you can definitely see that I know a lot of people think it's really fun to hear what I think about like hype stuff or very well known used to call patiki beers and stuff like that. So a lot of people want to see that. But then I throw in, like, for example, some Danish beer, new local brewery, whatever. I think it's really good. people don't have the same interest in that because there's still a big portion of American viewers, so they don't know what it is. So you kind of sometimes have to put like, if it's really good, put a clickbaity title on it or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, you know, like that. But whenever I do like really classic beer, people love that. I'm starting to do like a lot of classic throwback videos and whatnot. And people really think it's fun to hear what I think of some of those kind of beers. And I think a lot of the Americans that like to see that as well is because that's most of the European stuff that they know and can get. Because like all the more famous modern European brewers, they don't really do distribution to the States. Like all the haze brewers over here and whatnot, they don't really do that. They focus on the European market because the American market is so huge and flooded with, you know, breweries. Yeah. So there's kind of like it's a split.
I'm amazed at the level of stuff you get from the United States over there sometimes. You know what I mean? Some of the breweries that I can't even touch over here. Like I live in the United States and you guys have like, you know, Three Sons and like all kinds of these crazy big breweries kind of show up in your shelves over there. And I'm like, dude, you're 5 states over. I can't get it.
Yeah, it's great. You just mentioned Three Sons. A couple of weeks ago, I in Europe bought a bottle of Mortal Kombat from Three Sons on a web shop. It's just like it's a limited one-off from a brewery in the States. But, you know, I think it's because there's also a lot of these import companies that does this and whatnot. They have a lot of relationships with these breweries because of the beer fests. Yes. For some reason, one of the big pulls for us getting these things is also because the Mikkeller Beer Fest in Copenhagen, that kind of became like, you know, if you were something in the beer industry, you're invited to that festival. And that kind of helped the European market get a lot of these crazy things because brewers would bring bottles, you know, they'd send a few cases of some kind of hype stuff, whatever, that be sold in Copenhagen during that week and whatnot. And then, you know, some distributors meet these brewers at the festival and whatnot, and they make, you know, they make friends with them and they start talking about doing distribution and whatever. So like, you know, like right now we get Fremont on the reg, like Fremont barrel aged stouts. It's just like, what?
Yeah, that's it's almost like it's a half beer convention and half beer festival. Like it's like marketing convention for all the brewers to kind of intertwine and get their fingers in the European market. And that's the other part. Like you guys, we don't see any of that come back over here. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I've had Verdant, but that's because some person in England has literally packaged up and sent it to me because they wanted me to try it. It's not like we can actually get it here off a shelf or something like that, which is absolutely insane. And it seems like from what I've seen is that a lot of the breweries that you do get over there now, they're the logistics of getting it there is quite a bit better. You know, if you get an Equilibrium over there now, it's, you know, less than 2 months old, not 4 months old, you know?
Yeah.
And what's the price point over there for that stuff? I'm curious about that. If you were to buy any of that stuff off the shelf.
I think we just got a few months back, we got cans of the collab Equilibrium does with District 96, the Sexual Fluctuation Triple IPA, really good beer. Yeah. And I think that was like 140 crowns a can. So that's like almost like $20 a can.
$20 a can.
But that's how it is here with the import fees and all that shipping. And then there's a VAT, the European tax system. And then there is taxes on alcohol and all that stuff. So like they have to get a huge amount over, but still, and then they have to make a profit as well. So, you know, some of those beers
over here are quite expensive off a shelf. We just started getting them actually distributed off a shelf here in New Jersey. And we're not paying $20 a can, but Sexual Fluctuation off a shelf over here would be about $35 a 4-pack.
Okay, but you also mostly have to buy 4-packs, right?
Yeah, if places over here will break up beers into singles, but then they're even more expensive. It's not like they break them up to the equal parts. They divide it by 4. They go, nope, you're going to pay an extra $1. Just because we're breaking it out of a 4-pack. And that's even at breweries. Like breweries, you have to buy 4-packs or 6-packs, whatever format they have it in.
Yeah, here it's singles. Everything's singles. It's always been like, it's quite rare to see breweries do 6-pack format at all of their beer. You can buy 6 bottles, but it's 6 times the 1 unit price. So that's just how it is. But I think the price, though, like that was a very high, kind of hype release. But otherwise, I think the Equilibrium beers are around 70 to 90 crowns, which is around $10, $13 a can. And that seems to be around the average price for at least hazy beers.
What do you miss about being over here? Is there anything you miss about the beer scene? I mean, outside of just regular access to beer, is there something specific that you miss?
I think like the whole American scene and the openness about it, I thought was really cool. Like whenever I traveled anywhere in the States, there's so much openness. And I know there's a lot of things that are not, very open and things going on in the States. But one of the big things, Europeans can also be quite open, but I think in general, Europeans are a bit more reserved compared to Americans. A lot of Europeans, when they talk about Americans, they talk about them being a bit more confident and a bit more bombastic and whatnot, but also inclusive, which is somewhat true. I feel
you say arrogant weird.
I'm not saying arrogant. They can be some, but I think that's with every culture, every country, there's always going to be some people who are idiots. But most of the people, pretty much, I interacted with were really great people, and I made friends in the States that I still talk to this day. Which I thought was awesome. So I kind of missed that, and also just miss the atmosphere and just going to breweries, and there's like you hop around to all these different breweries, and they do their different kind of beers. Like in Denmark, we don't really have the same vibe. Like in Copenhagen, there's a few brew pubs, but mostly it's bars. It's not that like you go into a brewery and sit there and the tanks are there and all that. Like there's not a lot of breweries like that. And doing it like that. I think one of the coolest experiences here with like kind of like the whole destination tourism which a lot of breweries do in the States. There's only really one brewery doing it really well, which is called Godtberg. And it's a small farm brewery. It's kind of like, Hill Farmstead, in the middle of the countryside. They're right next to the ocean. Huge area of fields and farms and whatnot, and then they have like every summer they're open. You can go there, park your car, get some beers on draft, hang out. They fire up the barbecue. Sometimes they do music and stuff like that. I think is so cool, and I'd love to see more of that in Denmark. And it's happening, but it's just not as evolved as it is in the States. I mean, in Copenhagen, I keep referencing Copenhagen, but they're a bit more, into that kind of stuff. Us people from Jutland, we are even more reserved. So that's part of it.
Vice versa. Like, is there something there in the Danish culture, especially where you're located, that you don't see over here? Something that you think that we could definitely take a hefty dollop of. Is it just being reserved, not being as pedal to the metal on it?
I think it's also one thing most Danes are. Well, it also seems like you were not too good. Like COVID just made everything weird here as well. Like Danes. Danes, like, first of all, like to complain and bitch a lot, even though we live in a country where welfare is so high and life is pretty easy. There's always something to bitch about. Even one of the big things that people always joke about when they come here from abroad is like, why do Danes bitch so much about the weather? It's because it's one of the only bad things we have to bitch about. It's like it rains all the time. We hate it. Oh, why is the weather so bad? It's one of those weird things. So, where we're coming from. So, what were you saying again? So,
I was saying, is there something over there, the Danish, you're in your area, the culture, or something you think the American people could use a decent dollop of? Like, bring that over here. Like something that you like over there that you didn't see over here when you're doing like your beer journey, beer life.
So in terms of just culture in general, or like beer?
Yeah, well, beer. It could be culture in general. We don't have to pigeonhole just a beer.
No, beer culture. Huh? It's pretty. Yeah. Maybe the whole laid backness of Danish culture, and like a bit of we have something called the law of Jensen in Denmark, basically a kind of like an unspoken law. It's like, it's kind of like think before you speak. And it's I think that's a good point. But there's also negative sides to that. It's also things like you shouldn't think you're better than anyone else. And it's also in some ways used to, mentally put people down a bit, like put people off their pedestals so they don't seem to full of themselves. That's also part of it. But it can also be to such a degree that it's like, people will judge you if you succeed, if you kind of get that. So I think to some extent, there is something good about that. Like, people shouldn't be too full of themselves, and you kind of see more of a sense of that. But I think in general, just in the beer community, even though we hear a lot of stuff going on at the moment, I think in general it's quite open, and like beer people. That was Ryan who told me that beer people are usually good people, and like I experienced that openness in general in the beer industry. I really like that. And I think that goes both ways, like both in the States and in Denmark. Like people are quite open, and also like if you are a brewer, brewers will tell you how they do things. It's not like Michelin star chefs like my recipe's secret. I'll never teach you. It's like how do you ferment your lagers? I do this and that, and this and that. Like it's so open. I love it. So, but yeah, it's something that maybe that like think before you speak thing, but that's maybe more in general. Actually, I don't think American and European culture are that different anymore. You can feel Europe has gotten a lot more Americanized over the last few years, or just maybe a decade.
For good or bad.
Yeah.
How's the beer stuff shaped your life? Because obviously, you're an English major. You wanted to do that, but obviously you're skewing and working in the beer industry now. Like, you work in a bottle shop, correct?
I work in a brewery. I'm a brewer.
Yeah. And like, when you originally went and did your English major, that wasn't the goal, right?
No. Well, the thing is, like in Denmark, there's like this thing to push you into start a degree. Most people, when they're done with high school, they will have like a year break where they just have a year where they work and save up money to go traveling or whatever before they decide what to do with their lives and where to go in college and whatnot. But then there was this thing like if you do it within a year or two, I think your grade point average would be timed with 0.5 or something like that, or 0.7. So you'd have a higher grade point average if you applied for a degree like quickly. So you didn't spend like 3-4 years figuring out what you want to do. So there's kind of like a bit of pressure, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But what was the thing I was good at in school was English, and it was my favorite subject in school. And I loved like literature and movies and video games and stuff like that. You could analyze in English in high school. So I just started studying English at university, and I don't think it was until I really started doing the channel and figured out that, like, okay, beer is really cool. It'd be really cool to work in beer. And then I was done with my degree, and in Denmark, when you're done studying, you have like a social security net where you get paid. It's like an insurance, basically, where you pay a monthly fee to get a salary insurance. So you always have a paycheck for at least 2 years or something like that. I think it is. So I was on that. But when you're on that, you have to apply for jobs to get the money. Yes. And after a while, you also have to do an internship. And instead of doing an internship at a school teaching, I was like, okay, I'm going to try and ask my local brewery. So I went there and I applied for an internship. And then they was like, yeah, sure, come on in and we'll have a conversation, whatever. So I applied there. I ended up interning as a brewer. And back then I homebrewed a lot. I never homebrew now because I brew beer every day. But back then I homebrewed a lot. So I thought it was really cool to experience how beer was brewed professionally. I knew a little bit already from traveling and all this stuff and just geeking beer. And then after my internship was up, the owner there asked me if I wanted a brewer's degree. And I was like, yes. And then he hired me and paid for a brewer's degree. Like usually education is paid through taxes in Denmark, but brewing school is a private school, so you have to pay. So he paid for my degree and hired me after the internship. And I've been there for almost 5 years now.
And this is probably the most interesting question that I had, because I'm really curious. How do you balance the YouTube and you making beer? Because you're obviously living on both sides of those spectrum. You know what I mean? Do you like it's got to be weird for you to sit here and kind of talk about beer and in a critical sense to a certain extent, but also you're making it. So was there ever any kind of conversation with the brewer at your place being like, well, do you still want to keep doing this YouTube thing because you're doing this over here? How do you balance those two?
We talked about it from the day I started, and my boss was like, I don't care what you do in your free time. That's up to you. Okay. I know a lot of places in the States, like if you start working at breweries, whatever, they have strict policies about what you can do. Like you can't speak your opinion about different breweries and whatnot, but he didn't care. He was like, it's up to you. And also going to like being at beer festivals as a brewer pouring beer, I tried to like kind of split the two things apart. So like I never spoke about my brewer. I never, where I work, I never talked about the stuff we do or anything like that. I didn't want to come off as biased because it's something I produce. So I just leave it off. And then the master of hoppets is the master of hoppets. And all brewers I talk to, because I've been around for quite a while now, like over 10 years doing this stuff, people are saying like I shouldn't, like they don't want me to quit doing the master of hoppets because they like it. Like that's what they know me as well. So even though I'm sometimes critical, but then they're just like, well, now you can also see how it is when people critique your beer. So I never experienced anyone like being like after me because I'm critiquing beer, but also making it. And again, it's not my brewery. I'm hired to do it. I think it would be a bit different if I ran my own company as well.
Has anybody on YouTube ever reviewed your beer that you make?
Mm-hmm. Simon. Simon loved it.
Oh, yeah.
It was fun. I brought some of our most popular beers, and it was fun sitting there talking about it and just being on the other side of it, but he loved it. He thought it was really good. But the fun thing there was also a curveball because there was a Norwegian brewer there. He was kind of drunk though, so I don't know. I know they're good beers because they're fairly well rated as well. But it was a bit fun, But when you're a brewer as well, you can't help but look at ratings and reviews, even though you shouldn't. Next question.
Yeah. Like how much do you spend on Untapped looking? Because I don't use Untapped really at all. But if I was a brewer, you have to. Because you have to. You might not want to, but you have to because it's free market research. It'd be stupid if you didn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
How much do you spend on there, and how much of is it trying to find the truth? Dropping that top 20 and bottom 20%.
Yeah, I try not to look too much because a lot of people it can get in your head a bit, but you can't help but look once in a while. And especially like I don't want to call people. I know brewers do that. Like they call people out for giving bad ratings because whatever. Like for example, they check into an IPA, a West Coast IPA. Oh, this IPA is very bitter. I don't like it. 2 stars. And stuff like that, and call it out. It's like, I'm not going to call them out. They're, that's just their thing. Untapped is the mass of, like the problem with Untapped to me is like, there's no strict guidelines on how you do it. It's like, however you want to look at their system is how you do it. So it's like, whatever. It's just people having fun, checking in, logging beers. I've been a ticker myself with all that. I thought it was fun. I still do Untapped check-ins. Yeah, I try not to read too much into it, but still, sometimes you get a bit annoyed when you see stuff like that. And not just your own beer, just if you drink a beer you can taste that's really good, like you do get a little bit annoyed. Like you have, for example, if you have a fantastic Helles, for example, from Germany, just like this, tastes like it's benchmark brewed. It's unique because it has a hint of smoke and all that. And then you see the classic rating of someone who loves intensely forward craft beers with smack in your face hops and whatnot. It's like 1.5 star. It's just a blogger.
That's the thing too. I was talking with a local brewer yesterday. I went to go pick up a beer from a brewery down here called Conclave, and it's probably my favorite brewery in Jersey. But we're just talking about random bullshit, and he's like, he pretty much has his own scale. He's like, if I log in and I see somebody that rated my lager at 3.5, he's like, I view that as 4.5. He's like, just because he's like, it's never going to get above 4. You know what I mean? So it's if at 3.5, then it's more like 4.5 for me. So yeah, it's got to be a tough road. Do you guys do like across the board spectrum wise a bunch of different beers, or do you have like a core line that you really focus on?
Yeah, so like we have 2 brands. One is like a core line of very classic brewed beers, and like some of those are the same recipes that this brewery has done they've been around since 2004. So it's like very old school. So it's like Belgian blondes and like kind of what you saw in America when the craft beer revolution started there, like lots of German styles and lots of Belgian beer and like dry stouts and stuff like that. It's things like that. But then kind of when I started, I helped make the other brand, which is just a bit more modern. And so we kind of have that, and we do, your New England IPAs and double mesh imperial stouts and stuff like that. But at the moment, we are not playing around as much as I probably would like, just because we launched a distillery a couple of years ago. So I'm also slowly being trained as a distiller.
That's cool.
So we're making whiskey, actually, which is taking up a lot of time. The brew house is almost running 24/7 now, producing whiskey mash but also producing beer, of course. So like that's where
whiskey or like
it's single malt Scotch inspired. We do, so the whole project is basically where we work with some local farmers and we give them a barley variety every year that they sow and grow, and then harvest for us, and then we have it malted. And then in Germany at a malting plant, we don't really have. We have one close in, I think it's Sweden, but our output is too small for them to do it. So we're working with a small plant in Germany, and we get it back from Germany. We brew the whiskey mash in house, and then we distill it and age it in bourbon barrels. But our first vintage won't be out until next year. So,
okay.
But it's a huge project, and we do 4 different whiskeys with barley from 4 different islands.
No, I mean it's so smart. I mean, a lot of breweries are doing it now, starting distilleries, because you can be able to eventually be able to provide your own barrels for the brew house and kind of work back and forth off that, be symbiotic with each other. Back to the brewery, I guess it kind of applies to the distillery too. How hard is it for you guys over there? Hop acquisition for hops that in the States, if we have Pacific Northwest hops, or even stuff that, is it harder for you to get those kind of hops over there? Is it still kind of okay, you can get European hops pretty easily, or it's just across the board you can get whatever you want now? Is that a bit different than it is in the States, even though you weren't brewing over here?
Yeah, I mean, because of COVID, hop accessibility right now is pretty easy. I just got fresh Galaxy and Sabro and some different things a couple of weeks ago. But if we look back 2 years, if you didn't buy Galaxy when it was released, you didn't get Galaxy. Also, some of the cool, Nelson as well. If you didn't buy Nelson at release, you didn't get Nelson. But for American hops, they were a bit more accessible. Usually, if you work with, we worked a bit with Yakima Chief. We bought directly from them. It's cheaper to have a hop contract with them, though, but we don't have as big output. We're mainly a brew pub focusing on keg production. We don't really do bottles or cans or whatever. So most of our stuff is draft. So we don't have, we're too small for a hop contract. So that's usually if you have a hop contract with something like Yakima Chief or whatever, you're pretty well insured to get whatever hops you want. But at the moment, it's not too difficult. Of course, there's always new experimental hops, and they're often they go to specific breweries first. They can play, some of the hype breweries get to play around with them first, and then they kind of start to get easier to get. But a couple of years ago, at least, it was so hard. I wanted to brew with Galaxy for so long, and I missed it all the time. Every single time it was released, nope. And then the prices, it's not cheap.
Yeah,
it's not cheap.
Do you? I mean, COVID's not over, but we're starting to see a nice glimmer of hope.
Yeah,
things might return to normal. Is it just going to go back to that way? Do you think? Is it going to be,
Yeah.
Or
maybe.
Have you built relationships now that maybe you have a little bit easier access?
Yeah, I mean, the way we work with it now is we work with a few companies. So there's wholesale companies in Denmark that wholesale sell different brewing ingredients.
Hop brokers, basically.
Yeah, hop brokers, but they do all kinds of yeast and malt and additives and whatever. And we have relationship with these people. So it's, they can often, if you ask hard enough, they can find something, even though they said they don't have it. So when you have a relationship in place, it usually works out anyways. So I'm not too scared of it, but there's just a core selection of hops that we always have to have on hand. Our most popular IPA is New England IPA, which was actually my first recipe. It's not the weird thing though is the beer is not at all now as it was when it was originally released, because it morphed over time. But the 3 hops for that beer we always have in stock, and we always have to have it in stock because we sell about 1,000 liters every month of it. So we use a lot of hops for that. It's Nelson, Citra, and Mosaic. It's gotten, yeah. You heard of those hops? And my boss is like, "Can't we switch out Nelson with something else?" Nope. But it started as more of a West Coast thing. It was I wanted to do a New England IPA, but when I started there, my German brewmaster at the time was very reserved with using a lot of hops because he was very German. So it's he was like, "No, it's too expensive. No, it's too much." So it ended up being like a West Coast kind of IPA with English ale yeast or whatever. It was a bit weird, but it's morphed into something really good. And yeah, we sell a lot of it, which is pretty cool to see. People really enjoy it, so that's nice.
I mean, you said you're working there, and when you got out of your internship, the owner paid for you to get your brewer's degree. So I imagine you're there for a certain period. There's probably a little bit of kind of like, okay, I'll pay for this, and you stick around for a while. But I would imagine being a brewer and doing what you want to do, you eventually want to either travel or open your own spot. Like if you had like for some reason like tomorrow you got the ability to. You can't work at that place for some reason anymore. What would you want to do? Would you want to work towards creating your own space, or would you want to kind of travel and learn?
I would love to learn first. I feel like, there's a lot to learn, and I would love to just explore more and do different things. And that's something you would be able to if you had your own spot. But opening a production size brewery, because like right now where I'm at, I don't want to jump back to standing in a homebrew setup and brewing in like plastic buckets and all this, because when you start brewing on professional kit, it's so much more rewarding to brew on. So it's like if you want to make an investment on that, it's crazy. We have a very expensive brew house from Germany, from Kaspar Schulz, and if I had to open up something myself, it'd be a huge down payment. But what I want to do is just brew good beer, and I want to learn more about brewing. And you can do that if you had your own place. But at one point, if you do that and you open your own place, you're going to get away from that, because all of a sudden you're the owner and you're going to get into more like, a managing director thing. And you're looking into running a company instead of actually brewing beer. And I have a good friend who has a brewery called Bad Seed Brewing. And he's at like that pathway right now. He's the head brewer and founder of the company, but he's spending more and more time on running a company
than brewing
beer. So he's like, he wants to brew beer more. He doesn't want to run a company. So it's interesting. So
I forget what I had from Bad Seed. I had 1 or 2 beers from them. I like them though quite a bit.
Oh, nice.
Let's flip back to the channel real quick. You're probably like a lot of like me. I randomly have some people join me from time to time. A lot of like Beertubers that tend to do like, kind of solitary, just themselves doing beer reviews. And you do that, but pretty much from the get, you've always kind of like had a partner in crime rotating through different people. Is that just more, beer's about sharing, you love hanging out with people, or do you find yourself gravitating towards people that like kind of like to go through the beer journey with you? Because a lot of your videos are with other people. It's not just you around. I
think it's just the camaraderie of sharing beer. Yeah. Like growing up, having beer, it was always in company. Like I've never been the type of person that sat and drank beer on my own. Maybe if it's a long day of work, I would crack a bottle of whatever and then sit and enjoy that. But if I want to sit and nitpick and geek out about beer, it's just, it's more fun with friends who are in a similar mindset. And that's the same deal with everything. Like if you're into video games or if you're into movies or whatever, it's more fun to talk to similar minded people about it than just sitting on your own. So that's a big part of it. So that's why I've always tried to, we've always had people in, and it's been the weirdest way I've met some of these people. Like back in the day, Jakob the Lord of Malts.
Yeah.
Who was on the channel. He was at a house party I was at, and he watched my channel, and we ended up talking about beer, and then we ended up drinking beers together. And same with Brett, who's on the channel right now. Him and some friends, or some of his friends, Tobias was on the channel once in a while as well, went to America and brought some monkish back. And Brett wrote me a message on YouTube. Like, I've been following you for a few years. I have a monkish beer that a friend brought from the States. I'd like to share with you if you're down. It's like, sure. And now we pretty much see each other every week drinking awesome beers. So
yeah, that's funny. How dare you threaten me with monkish? God damn it.
Sorry.
That's
funny.
What's your favorite reviews to do? Not necessarily style, because you do a bunch of different stuff. You do like the versus stuff where you started doing like
pretty much. And the blind stuff inspired by you, pretty much.
Like is that the stuff that really kind of, or like old school stuff you're saying you're getting back into lagers and stuff like that, like when you have like that classic beer what you might have reviewed 10 years ago, now you review it now and then like look back at an old review and be like, man, I still love this as much as I did back then, or now I'm like, this is hot. I don't know why I like this back then. Like,
But
it's got to be fun when you have that catalog to kind of go back to.
It is so fun. It is so fun. You can see that also in my enthusiasm in like the latest Schneider Weisse revisit where I tried the Hopfenweisse. I was like, but this is still such a great fucking beer. And it's just like, I was just amazed how good it still was. And then sometimes you have some other beers who's like, oh, I like this. Okay. But it's so fun. It's like, you know, us humans, we have a thing with nostalgia. And beer can be nostalgic too. You know, I was growing up at the time when I'm still growing up. You know, I'm a young adult, if you can say. Like, I'm only 31, but when I started the channel, I was 19. I was a kid. Yeah. So like seeing these things, it's a bit, you know, you think back to memories, and I was like, so it gets a bit nostalgic. But then some of it, you know, it's not just nostalgic. Some of it's also just really great beer. So I think those episodes are really fun to make. And then I also still really love doing like the blind tasting we started doing in the battles, especially when like we did one with Hayes that was full blind. It was so difficult, but it was not full blind because I was the one having to try and source these beers, so I knew what we were getting. But trying to just like figure out what it was, and the fact that you get some of those right, like I nailed Verdant, Treehouse, and Monkish. I was like, "What? How could I guess that?" It was like, "What the hell?" It must have been luck, but that was really fun to do as well. And then I also, you know, I like just once you know checking out hype. Hype is it's fun to see if hype beer is as good as it's hyped to be. And sometimes it's merited, and sometimes it's not. But and you see that.
You can tell the difference. It's when you get a hype beer and it's really good, you're like, okay, I understand.
Yeah, you're totally like on board. It's like you totally get why people go nuts. But then you have something that's hyped, and you're like, I don't really, why. I feel like I'm that guy if it's you know, smoothie sours. I don't understand why people don't just drink a smoothie.
Yeah.
And if they want it hard,
just do it. You don't have to.
That's what I'm saying.
And that's the thing. And I pretty much say it every time I do one of those videos. I'm like, this is a very tasty beverage.
Yeah.
It's just not beer. Like, and I'm not trying to like poop on it saying it's not beer. I'm not that old curmudgeon guy. I am that old curmudgeon guy, but not in that moment. But I'm just like, it's just not beer. Like, that's fine. Just go get a Jamba Juice and throw some, like, you know, vodka in there.
Yeah. If you want a sparkling, add some soda water, whatever.
What's your do you have a whale? Do you have a get? You've been like, I've been wanting to review this thing forever, and I just can't get it.
You know, I ticked my biggest white whale earlier this year, which was Beer Barrel Time from Side Project. And ever since trying that beer, I want to drink more Side Project. Man, it's so good. But you have to drop some serious cash or bourbon or whatever if you want to trade for it. Like when I was getting into looking up like beer back in the day, both me and Jakob and whatever, we were looking to try and get the best of the best. And we figured out we had this lambic locally in Denmark, Blåbær Lambic from Cantillon, Blåbær, only released in Copenhagen, super rare and limited. And with that beer, we could get anything we wanted.
Yeah.
So we would go to there once a year, pick up bottles, and then we do trades in the States. But that market has changed so much. Like most of the people who want to try that beer, they've tried it. And now in the States, you have brewers trying to recreate lambic and actually doing it really well. So the interest isn't really there anymore. So like trying to trade nowadays, most brewery or most people, they either want money or they want bourbon, at least with the really, really hype stuff like Side Project. Like I traded like crazy amounts of bottles to try and get Beer Barrel Time. In terms of secondary value, as you talk about that stuff, I traded almost $1,000 worth of beer to get that one bottle. Because no one bought.
I'll send you. I'll connect you with the guy.
Nice.
No, I will. There's this one guy. He's super nice. He watches the channel. He probably watches your channel too. I would imagine he's big into beer, but he's super nice. He's sent me a ton of side projects. Just like I want to see what you think. Like, and none of the big, huge barrel aged stuff. A lot of more sour stuff. But he lives down the street from there, so he'll text me every now and then and be like, "Do you want anything?" He'll send me like a picture of their for sale board. I was like, "Yeah," and then he's just like, "Yeah, whatever." He's like, "You just pay me cost and shipping and whatever." So I'm sure he did the same for you. So
that would be crazy.
Yeah, we'll see what's what. But last but not least, because we're about an hour in, so I think we're good to go. I just want to ask, why Metallica, man? Or the origin of the name to begin with. No, dude, you're talking to a living, breathing Metallica lover pre-Black album. Pre-Black album, like that. You have to understand. I graduated high school in 1994, so my formative music years was like 86 to 94. That is Metallica. That's Master of Puppets. You know what I mean? So I understand why the name exists, but where did it come from for you?
I want to tell you just a slightly cringe moment about the channel and everything with the name. One of the first years I was at Mikkeller Beer Celebration. Like, I was one of the first people really to blog about beer in Denmark. There was a few other people, but I was one of the early ones. And one of the first ones, I was the first one to ever do anything with video. And one of the first years I went to side, they have a fire truck where you can buy drinks. And they have a huge stereo system. And I was walking around outside. They put on Master of Puppets, and I thought it was so embarrassing. They're walking around listening to this, like, and then people were like, "Oh, Master of Puppets!" They're standing next to me. It was like, yeah, that's so cool. Like, but no, the reason why I chose that name was just because I felt like just calling my own name on a channel would be stupid. And everyone, back then, people were also doing names for YouTube. I was like, I love hoppy beer, so hops and Master of Puppets is one of my favorite Metallica albums, so and that could kind of be mashed up somewhat. So that was how it was. And I've been a huge Metallica fan in the day, but I don't like the new Metallica. To be honest, the new stuff I feel like is kind of crappy. Kind of, it is crap. But the best Metallica albums for me is like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. Yeah. Those are gold. Kill 'Em All is also really good, but Master Ride the Lightning especially.
Ride the Lightning's the best. I mean, I love Master of Puppets, but Ride the Lightning's like king shit of fuck mountain.
Such a fantastic album. It was what I listened to at the time, and then I gravitated a bit in towards a bit more heavy stuff. And I listened to a lot of Swedish melodic death metal, the Godtberg sound. I've been into that ever since. Back then, listening to In Flames was a huge band for me. And they're kind of like, I call them the Metallica of Melodeath, because they are also just like right now, I don't know what the hell they're doing. But one of their best albums, Clayman, they re-released it and re-recorded some of their most famous songs. And it sounds like there's no bass line. They're doing a total Metallica. Like, what was the album called where you almost can't hear the bass?
Nothing.
Justice for All, right? It was when Jason Newsted came as a bassist, and they kind of turned the bass track down because of the entire thing with Cliff, whatever. But it's just like, I don't know what they're doing, man. You shouldn't. They have such iconic songs on that album, and then they remake them and make them poppy and weird.
That's why you listen to the old stuff.
Yeah. And I do. You still have that. So
I like the name of my channel, but I'll tell you what, man. There was a couple choices I made towards the beginning. I was like, what am I going to call it? And if I called it one of those, I would feel like, I'm like, oh man, you're an idiot. Why did you call it that? So, but that's the thing. It's much like a beer. It doesn't matter what you call the beer. If the beer is good, it defines the name. You know what I mean? So even though you have that kind of attachment, if someone ever gave you guff about the name, like, oh, Metallica, and be like, okay, you don't like Master of Puppets, and they said no, then be like, then you're an asshole. Like, because that's a great album. Like, it's like sure, what came after might be a little bit whatever, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I've never gotten gruff about it, but a lot of times people mistake it and they think it's called Master of Hoppets. So the Master of the Little Folks of Lord of the Rings.
Jesus, Hobbits! Jesus. Oh my God! That's be like, where your Elfish reviews? Do you do any reviews of Elfish? Whatever
that would be interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming on, dude. It was very cool. This is the first time we've actually really sat down and talked one-on-one, so it was very fun to kind of sit here and chat back and forth and stuff like that. So I know this doesn't need to be said, but we'll say it anyway. How do people find you?
On YouTube, The Master of Hoppets, and Facebook and Instagram and all that social media stuff. Untapped everywhere. Everywhere is either The Master of Hoppets or Master of Hoppets. But YouTube is where I'm mostly active, and Instagram, I think.
And anything fun coming up on the YouTubes? You're gonna, now with COVID, if you're vaccinated, you might be able to go out. Because I know you did a bunch of festival stuff in the past. You did a little bit of out and about. Are you going to plan to do that? Or are you going to take a year off?
I really want to do more out and about, but as it is right now, it doesn't look like I will be vaccinated until like late August.
Oh, it's that hard for you over there, yeah?
Yeah, we have a lot vaccine because of some very crazy side effects. Like people have died from the vaccines, from blood clots, I think it's called in English. So they stopped using some specific ones. I'm just last in queue because we have a shortage and they're only focusing on using, I think it's the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine at the moment. So it's going to take a while. So right now, if you want, you can go out, and I do, go out and whatnot, but you have to do the tests every single time to go out. So, but we'll see what we'll end up doing. MBCC, they say, is going to happen this year. So that's probably going to happen. But it's in October. So I think that should be fine. But yeah, I want to do more out and about because the last year has been mainly just in the apartment.
Yeah. Don't tell me about it, man. Like, oh God, man. I have a kid. I live in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? I actually ended up getting COVID. Yeah, I got COVID in November, but it's like I was one of the luckiest people on earth. Like I literally had a sniffle and lost taste for a couple days, and that was it. Nothing. But I'm also vaccinated now, so I'm kind of like double, whatever, safe. But my wife isn't. My kid is newborn, so I'm still a homebody now. So I'm looking forward to hopefully, if people do the right thing, get to the point where we actually can get out and about and hang out and do some beers and stuff like that. And I had a Beertuber yesterday for the first time in a year.
Yeah,
I haven't got anywhere. So
it was, going out for the first time, having a beer at a bar or whatever. I did that a couple of weeks ago when we opened back up, and it was just weird because like when we had the lockdown here, like actually this last year, I calculated I've only worked a total of 6 months because of lockdowns, where you've just been at home, which is nuts. So it was amazing to go out and I could sit down, have a pint of beer, and like just sit and hang out. It was great. So
that was me yesterday. I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, this is what it's like. I'm like, I missed this. But,
I missed this.
Hopefully get back to it.
Yeah. And a lot of people are also asking me to do more food content. So maybe I should do that. Like I do a lot of food content on Instagram.
I've seen it. You definitely got your hand in a little bit of, what are you doing? A lot of barbecue and stuff.
Yeah. Main reason was because you can't really get American barbecue done right in Denmark, except in Copenhagen at Warpigs. So I just started doing it myself in my backyard or in the backyard of our apartment.
So apparently, if you want to do anything, you go to Copenhagen. If you want to do anything that's not strictly Danish focused, you have to go to Copenhagen.
Yeah, I mean, there is, Aarhus and Aalborg have a lot of open things. Like we also have ethnic food and all these things, like whatever you want to do. That we have a lot of culture things. But like Copenhagen has always been first mover. It's been like Copenhagen, and then it spread to the rest of the country. And that's how it's always been because it's the capital and it's the biggest city in the country.
Yeah. So. It's a huge international city, just globally, not just for Denmark or whatever. Like if you wanted to go to Copenhagen, is that a big deal, like travel wise for you, or is it pretty easy?
No, it's easy. I can hop on a plane and it's 30 minutes. So,
oh, jeez. Okay.
Yeah, or I can take a train. It's 4.5, or is it 5 hours? So, not too bad. But I will say, like we talked a lot about Copenhagen. The rest of Denmark is pretty damn amazing as well. And as like I mentioned, Ebeltoft Godtberg is one of the brewery must visits, I think, in this country. And also, like Denmark, like a lot of people when they go to Denmark as well, because we talked a lot about Copenhagen, they go to Copenhagen because that's what they know. But there's so much more to Denmark as well than Copenhagen. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah. Otherwise, he was going to get a bunch of hate mail from people outside of Copenhagen. There you go, brother. Thank you very much for coming on. Go check him out, Master Hoppets, everywhere, unless there is a "the" in front of it. But I'm sure if you just type in the old Googs, it'll just pop up. Go check him out doing stuff. And thank you very much for coming on, dude.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hopefully we do this again sometime. If you ever get in the States or if I ever get over there, we'll have to chat here in real life.
It would be awesome. Yeah.
There you go. So we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.
Cheers.